Hello and welcome back to Bedtime with Mama. Tonight we're going to be reading Chapter 7 of The Double Trouble Society. If you remember in Chapter 6, the girls got to their school early to meet all of their classmates and ask them if they knew anything about Hokum House. And all of the kids remembered Hokum House in its disrepair. So the girls thought, what could be making all of the adults forget? And then they thought, it's the smoke that they've been seeing all over Hokum House. So they ran back to Hokum House. And that brings us to Chapter 7. The circle is broken. The smoke from the chimney of Hokum House had now created a cloud in the sky that swirled above almost half the houses in the street. It was beginning to block out the light of what little autumn sun Crowwood Peak got. Maggie and Ivy stopped for a moment to take in its magnitude. The air smelled like dead, rotting leaves and burnt marshmallows. Not altogether unpleasant, but definitely not normal. Maggie went to bolt across the road, but Ivy reached out to stop her. Ivy, what's wrong? We have to do something. Maggie pointed up at the billowing, glittering smoke. I know, Maggie, but look. Ivy nodded towards Hokum House, where Amy had appeared in her hooded cloak at the front garden gate. There were two crows, one perched on either side of the gate, both glaring at them, cocking their heads from side to side. Amy was staring right at them too, smiling. However, her eyes were telling them that she knew they had skipped school and they were coming straight for her. She raised a hand and beckoned them with a crooked finger, but they stood still. What do we do? Maggie whispered, as if Amy would be able to hear them over the whipping wind. I think we have to go and talk to our neighbor. If the story Amy is sticking with is that she's simply our neighbor who has known us all our lives, then there's nothing to be scared of, Ivy said, trembling. And once we're inside, we'll say that we have some questions about her house for the festival tomorrow night. We could find out something vital for our plan to stop Crowwood Witch from claiming a 13th child. Maggie nodded, her teeth chattering, but whether that was from the biting chill of the air or from the terror of talking to someone who could turn them into rats, Ivy couldn't tell. You sound like you've been doing some more research on the legend, Maggie eyed Ivy. She was usually the adventurous one, but she was surprised by her friend's determination. Just a little bedtime reading, Ivy said. I don't want to give myself nightmares, but I thought it might help if I was as clued in as possible. So you really think the Crowwood Witch is going to return? Maggie said quietly, looking back across the road at Amy, who was still waiting patiently for them to join her. I'm not sure, but if we're sticking to our list of facts, Amy definitely isn't who she says she is, and we need to deal with that problem first and foremost. If it turns out that she really is the Crowwood Witch, well, we'll deal with that problem when we come to it, shall we? Ivy took Maggie's hand and gave it a squeeze. Okay, Maggie said, clenching her teeth and digging deep for more courage. Let's do this. Maggie and Ivy cautiously crossed the road and came face to face with Amy, who removed the hood of her cloak and smiled sweetly, despite the wind tossing her long white hair around her. Hello, Double Trouble, she said, her voice sounding like wind chimes. How does she know that that's what we call ourselves? Maggie whispered to Ivy, spooked. But Ivy ignored her, refusing to look away from Amy's dark eyes. Hello, Amy. May we come inside? We were wondering if you had any more of those delicious cupcakes, ramshackle. Ruined, she said with a smile to match the sweetness of Amy's. Something flickered across Amy's face that was less than pleasant. For a moment she looked concerned, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. I'm sorry, Ivy. I'm not welcoming visitors inside at the moment, but I'm happy to speak to the two of you on the doorstep. Max said you'd be around to apologize for yesterday. She gave a twinkly little laugh. Had anyone else uttered those words, Ivy would have apologized for the intrusion and maybe even felt a little embarrassed for asking to come inside. However, when Amy said it, it instantly made Ivy wonder what she might be hiding in that house. Well, actually, yes, we are sorry for ruining your cakes yesterday, Ivy muttered, and Maggie nodded with her. and for what we said. But that's not why we came over. Maggie isn't feeling too well. So we're not at school and both our dads are at work. We were hoping you could help. Ivy turned to Maggie and widened her eyes. Oh, yeah, Maggie groaned and began to rub her head. I've got a really bad headache, and I'm dizzy, and I feel sick, and everything's getting dark, and I feel the end might be near, and ouch! Ivy had elbowed her, and now my ribs hurt. I'm very sorry to hear that, Maggie, Amy said with sympathy. Max gave me a spare set of keys in case of emergencies. Let me fetch it so I can let you in. And I can call your father for you. Let him know you're not at school. Ivy and Maggie both understood that Amy wasn't stupid. She knew that Maggie was actually feeling fine and that they were most definitely fibbing. So, can't we come into your house? Maggie asked once more forcefully. Like I said, I'm not welcoming visitors at the moment, Amy said through gritted teeth. Ivy yanked Amy's sleeve towards her house on the right. It's okay, Amy. I'll take her to my house and look after her there. I'll call my dad and let him know. I'm sure he'll understand. Thanks for trying to help. Ivy dragged Maggie back up the long path and over to her own front door without looking back. She lifted a stone plant pot and retrieved the spare key. Once they were safely inside, they let out the breath they'd been holding. Why did you ask her why she wouldn't let us come in our house? Ivy said crossly. We clearly weren't getting anywhere by beating around the bush, Maggie said, sitting on the bottom stair. Besides, she obviously knew we were lying. There wasn't much point in keeping up the fib now, was there? No, I guess not. Ivy sat down on the floor. But why wouldn't she let us in? It can't be that messy, not when she's tidying up with the flick of her fingers. What's she hiding? Oh, I don't know. Pickling jars ready to fill with the hearts of innocent children. This isn't time for jokes, Maggie. I wasn't joking, Maggie replied gravely. Look, I don't know what she has in that house, but maybe it's time to do things my way. She jumped to her feet and waggled her eyebrows at Ivy, who suddenly clutched her stomach. Why does that idea make my tummy tie itself into knots? Politely asking to enter her home clearly isn't working. So how about... Ivy gasped before Maggie could finish her sentence. You can't seriously be suggesting we break in. No way, that's too far, even for me, Maggie cried, and Ivy let out a sigh of relief. What I'm suggesting is that maybe we hop over the fence, get a closer look in through the windows. That's still trespassing, Ivy warned. Oh, come on. Mr. Shamble always lets me jump over the fence when my basketball accidentally goes in his garden. Does he let you, or do you do that when he's not looking? Ivy asked, crossing her arms across her chest. Either way, I've never gotten in trouble for it. So, Maggie, Ivy groaned, taking the spot where Maggie had been sitting. Okay, think of it this way. Maggie paced up and down in front of Ivy, pleading her case. Amy is definitely up to something, and if she is the Crowwood Witch, and she's come back all these years to claim the 13th child, then maybe we would actually save someone's life by being a little bit reckless. Ivy thought about it for a moment and began to nod slowly in agreement. No one's breaking in anywhere. There would be no breaking of anything. It's simply a little peek through a back window. What could possibly go wrong? Maggie added. I've heard that from you before. Ivy rolled her eyes. Double trouble is what could happen. Well, are you in? Are we doing it? Yes, but let's do it quickly before I change my mind. Yes! Maggie punched her arms in the air in triumph. Wait, we're doing it now? Isn't this the perfect time? Both our dads are at work and we're already skipping school. Might as well make the best of it. Wow, Ivy, I didn't expect you to embrace truancy so quickly and wholeheartedly, Maggie said with wide eyes, astounded. You're sick, remember? If my dad asks, that's the story and we're sticking to it, okay? Oh, absolutely. Maggie clenched her chest dramatically and leaned against Ivy's shoulder. I was near death. I could see the light and was about to walk into it when Ivy rushed to my side and nursed me back to health. Ivy rolled her eyes, but smiled all the same. What? I'm just practicing my story. Too over the top? Maggie added, laughing. Maybe a smidge. Ivy reached into her school bag and pulled out her trusty notebook. She flipped to a fresh, clean page and wrote, "Everything we know about witches." I think it'd be good to remind ourselves exactly what we already know about witches from movies we've seen and books we've read, so we know what to be on the lookout for. And if we find anything new, we can add it to the list, she began to explain. Great idea. Okay, witches make potions, Maggie began. All we know is that Amy makes fishy cupcakes, Ivy pointed out. Maybe we haven't seen any potions yet, Maggie suggested. They also fly on broomsticks, she added. They have spell books, they have magic wands and pointy hats and pointy shoes. Don't forget the pointy shoes, Maggie clicked her heels together 3 times. And they often have black cats. Amy definitely has one of those. Ivy wrote everything down as quickly as she could, and she was surprised to find that she had filled up almost a whole page. Do you think witches really eat children? She asked, putting the tip of the pen between her teeth and chewing it nervously. I don't think it's a typical witch meal. It's probably only the really wicked ones who do that. You know, the old ones who have sold their souls for immortality. Amy seems young, but if she's the Crowwood Witch, then she's over 300 years old, Ivy pointed out. Well, let's hope that's because she has a really strong anti-aging cream and not because she's eating children's hearts. Ready? Maggie asked Ivy, squeezing her shoulder. No, Ivy breathed out deeply. Let's go. It had begun to drizzle, but the smoke was still thick and the smell even thicker. They went out of the back door of Ivy's house. Amy's house was set away from the road with a long path to her front door, and she might easily spot them if they went that way. They kept low to the ground, crouching behind the newly painted white panels on Amy's back fence. What do you think Amy is putting in that fire to make that kind of smoke? Ivy asked, peering above them as the shimmering plumes. Maybe she's cooking the cat, Maggie said, grinning devilishly. That's a terrible thing to say, Maggie said, with little conviction. Are you seriously telling me you'd miss that evil feline? No, I wouldn't miss it, but I also don't want to see it burned alive, thank you very much. Sometimes I wonder if you're a little bit witchy yourself, Ivy said, as with a prod of her finger. Rude, Maggie wrinkled her nose. Any sign of her? I'm not looking. Why don't you look? This is your plan, after all. Fine. 3, 2, 1. Maggie quickly stood on her tiptoes and poked her head above the fence for a split second. Anything? Ivy asked. No sign of Amy, so I bet she's in our kitchen at the front. If we can get close enough, we should be able to get a good look inside the back rooms. Ivy nodded and began to wiggle the panels in the fence. What are you doing? One of these is loose. Remember? Frankenstein broke it years ago when he came over here chasing Ramshackle out of the garden. They went right through it, but it must have been fixed itself when Amy worked her magic on the house, Ivy said, huffing. Okay, new plan, Maggie whispered, tightening her ponytail. Hoist me over the fence and I'll go and look. You can't go alone. I have to. The fence is too tall for us to both get over, and I'm pretty sure you don't want to be the one nosing about. Okay, give me a foot. Ivy laced her fingers together to create a foothold for Maggie to step into. Before she knew it, Maggie had pulled herself up and over, and there was a soft thud as her feet hit the grass on the other side. I'll just be a moment, she whispered through the fence. Ivy stood as high as she could to peer over the top of the panels. She saw Maggie run as quickly as she could, stopping low on the ground over the nearest window. But there was a curtain pulled across the lower half, and there was no use. Maggie couldn't get her high enough to see in. The window on the other side of the house had thick shrubs, prickly-looking shrubs, right up to the windowsill. Suddenly, Maggie's brown eyes appeared over the top of the fence. Again, do what I do. I can't see now I'm stuck on this side. We haven't thought this through properly. Between the noise of the wind and her heart thudding in her ears, Ivy could barely hear herself think. The rain was coming down harder now and was making it difficult for her to see through her glasses. Wait, I've got an idea. Maggie ducked out of view, and Ivy could hear her moving about on the other side of the fence. I can see a big old stone just there. If I can get it over, I can stand on it and look through the top half. She grunted between words, trying to drag the little stone out of the mossy, muddy pit. The sky had become so dark with the smoke billowing from the chimney of Hokum House that it felt like night was falling. Amy must have been stoking a fire as big as the bonfire she lit every year on the village green on bonfire night. I've got a really bad feeling about this, Maggie, Ivy said, a memory stirring in her. It's okay, I can manage on my own. It's actually not that heavy now that I've got it off the grass, Maggie reassured her, her voice further away now as she managed to pick the stone up and waddle with it to the house. No, it's not that. It's something else. Something to do with the legend, because I can't quite remember. Just give me a sec. Well, you keep thinking. I'm almost at the house. Maggie dropped the stone on the ground right underneath the window. Careful not to slip on the slick, mossy surface. She placed one black school shoe next to the other and went on to her tiptoes to see inside the house. 300 years she won't be seen, but she'll return to claim 13. Ivy recited the prophecy in her head, not able to shake the feeling that she was missing something very important indeed. The sky will crack, the earth will shake, when the dozen's circle break. The dozen's circle. Amy's heart began to pound even louder, as if they were trying to warn her from inside her rib cage. No, there was nothing for it. She was going to have to run through Amy's front garden and down the side of the house to Maggie's rescue. Before she could rethink it, Ivy took off as fast as she could down the side of the house, through the gate, then into Amy's front garden. She ran along the long path, then along the side of the house where she could see Maggie, who was peering with great intent into Amy's window. Ivy ran to the now empty spot by the fence where Maggie had found the stone. Further up the fence was another, and then another a little further along. There would be 12 in total. She knew, looping all around the house. 12, including the one that Maggie was now standing on. Maggie, get down! Ivy ran to her and tugged on her sleeve until Maggie wobbled and stepped back into the stone. Maggie knelt to inspect the stone. What are you doing? Maggie protested. I was getting a really good look inside. I can't see any spell books, but there are an awful lot of bottles that look like they could have contained poison. Well, either that or they're empty, fizzy bottle drinks. But, Maggie, look. Ivy's hands were trembling as she scraped back a handful of moss to reveal something etched into the surface of the stone. Clarence Caldwell, Maggie read. He's one of the 12 children who got taken by the Crowwood Witch. This stone is part of Crowwood Peak. Remember? The witch split the mountain into pieces and sent huge boulders hurtling through towards Crowwood Peak. If it hadn't been for the witch's sister, the village would have been crushed, and so the people took 12 of the smaller stones and carved the names of the 12 children on them and placed them round Hokum House. This is one of them. Yeah, I know. So what? Maggie shrugged, wiping rain out of her eyes, rain that was coming down in huge globs that made a thwacking sound when they hit the ground around them. So, they were in a perfect circle around the house, and now that circle is broken, Maggie said, beginning to tremble. The sky will crack, the earth will shake when the dozen's circle break, Ivy whispered to Maggie. We've broken the dozen's circle, but what does that mean? The sky above them cracked and sizzled with lightning that seemed to be coming from within the clouds of smoke, lightning that was the same color as Amy's eyes. Suddenly those eyes were upon them as Amy threw open the book, glaring so brightly that neither Maggie nor Ivy could look directly at them. What have you done? Ivy slammed her balled-up fist against the windowsill, and a shockwave of intense purple light burst from them, sending Maggie and Ivy hurtling through the air on their backs on the grass. Ivy looked over at Maggie and through blurred vision saw her lying unconscious on the ground with her eyes closed before the darkness came for her too. That is the end of chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed that chapter. Come back tomorrow and we will read chapter 8. Sweet dreams.